Oi, pessoal, bom dia a todos e a todas. Sejam todos muito bem-vindos ao nosso encontro. Eu sou Rosana Jatobá, sou jornalista especializada em sustentabilidade há 15 anos. Eu trabalho com essa agenda nos meios de comunicação.
And the means of communication in order to take through these means to the large public all aspects related with the ESG agenda in the corporate world. It's an honor to be today with you with a very good team to talk about the important aspects of sustainability in the production chain for meat. The topic is the reality of meat production, starting with small producers all the way to consumers. This is a very relevant topic, and we realize that in all the world there's great pressure from consumers to know the source of the meat they eat and the conditions under which this production was made in areas where there was illegal deforestation, exploitation of indigenous peoples, work exploitation, if there was slavery, if there was inadequate management of the soil, many environmental and social factors, topics of worthy work. We will talk about all of these topics in our event, and starting now, I would like to announce you to the team who is with me now, great specialists like Leila Halfushi, who is manager of Agro. Leila, good morning. Good morning, Rosana. It's a pleasure to see you all. Leila will talk about the context of agribusiness in Brazil, and she will talk about cattle raising as an example, and also the territorial consideration. We have Luana Maya. She does exceptional work in Cebedis. She's Operations and Strategic Planning Director in the Brazilian Entrepreneurial Board for Sustainable Development. Luana with Marina Gross. Welcome to this event, and she's going to talk about the main challenges of climate change for food production and for Brazilian agribusiness sector. Good morning, Luana. Good morning. It's a pleasure to see all of you. After Luana, we will have the presence of the governor of Mato Grosso, Mauro Mendes. He will talk about the state's responsibility as one of the main food producers on top of some other issues. Then Fernando Sampaio, Executive Director of PCI. Good morning, Fernando. How are you? Hello, Rosana. Good morning. Thank you. Welcome. Fernando will talk about the structure of the governance model, which is necessary and crucial to make decisions regarding the different players in the productive chain for meat. And we have Alexandre Kosoy, who's a financial specialist from the World Bank. Good morning, Alexander. The World Bank is a very important player in this segment, and they explain how the bank assessed and included strategies with environmental safeguards for the project that took place in 2017 in the state of Mato Grosso. Then Mariela Mariutzon, Director of IDH Brazil. Daniela Mariutzon, how are you? Good morning, Rosana, how are you? And thank you for your invitation. Well, welcome. Daniela is here because IDH invested in the sustainable program for calves, and she will also talk about other questions. And then we have our Sustainability and Communication Director, Mark Frick, Paulo Pianidis. Paulo, good morning. How are you? Good morning, Rosana. Everything is great. It's wonderful to be here with you. Paulo, what he's going to talk about is the eye of McFreak. It was something they launched in June last year. It's a program that inspires us. We will be able to discuss it, and write down the aspects that can provide a compass to guide the whole sector. Then we will have the Q&A session, the questions from our public that will come through WhatsApp. We will try to answer all your questions and comments, but due to time restrictions, if we cannot answer all of them, don't worry, because we have sustentabilidade at macfreak.com.br. I apologize for my voice because in Sao Paulo it's very dry. I work with my voice all the time. I'm a bit hoarse right now. Does anybody have problems understanding what I'm saying? Raise your hand. Okay, I think not. So let's start our explanations. I would like to start with Leila Harfush, a managing partner of Econ. Leila, please tell us about the context of agro businesses in Brazil, a very strong sector and leader in our economy, and bringing cattle raising as an example, how a territorial coverage can become a solution for the productive chain. Rosanna, thank you very much. I prepared some slides. I'm going to show you some data so that we can start the debate. And the main context is the agro business in the Amazon, the economic productive context where some challenges and opportunities can be found. The first thing that our audience has seen is the difference between the legal Amazon and the Amazon biome. Some states have a partial Amazon biome within the legal Amazon. When we talk about a territorial region, according to data from the IBG Institute of Statistics, the northern region considers that almost all the states are there except Mato Grosso and Maranhão. In 9 states, we have the Amazon biome, which is 48% of Brazilian territory. The legal Amazon, it covers 59% of Brazil. A large part of legal Amazon are protected areas. 26% of the use of land is agribusiness. When we see the biome use represents 15% of the total. Some important topic is the population. We have 28 million people living in legal Amazon, 13% of the Brazilian population, and 9% or less than 9% of the GDP is generated in the legal Amazon. So here we have an idea of low revenue, low economic and educational index, low income, that is related to the topics that we will discuss today. Now linking this with the big challenge represented by deforestation, it seems to me that is very relevant aspect that we have to stress that is above the agribusiness sector. If we see the degrees of deforestation, we see the types of territories, areas related to deforestation. Most of them are outside private areas. We have some non-assigned public areas in large part of this deforestation together with rural settlements and the preservation units. So we have activities that are generated here with different land uses, different from agribusiness, although many times the agribusiness sector becomes a secondary objective of deforestation. Of course, we have agro-industrial production, but we must remember that illegal deforestation is over 90% of the deforestation of the biome, and the land speculation needs the agro-business sector needs regulation of the land in order to generate returns on this land in the future. And to provide more context, we have 125 municipalities which are partially or totally inserted in this biome, which brings a challenge of control and zonification, territory control, in as well as the application or compliance of the forest code of Brazilian environmental law for territorial control regarding environment preservation and sustainable production. And this is a huge challenge, and the beef sector has several challenges. One that I would like to stress is that 25% of cattle slaughtering is informal, or there are no guidelines for animal transit or traffic for this sector, and this has an impact on all topics that have to do with monitoring, origin, sustainable production of the value chain of beef. And what we have seen recently, the main actions that have been developed by the value chain, we have the supermarkets and the financial market has entered this agenda in a more active way and with bigger impact, which is the agenda of excluding producers, and this solves the problem. We have not been able to take deforestation to levels close to zero, and this has also generated undesirable effects in the value chain. For example, the increase of informality in this biome that shows risks that go beyond environmental risks and also has sanitary risks for the whole chain. And I should also mention the socio-economic and productive context within the Amazon biome. These are data from the agribusiness census, excluding Mato Grosso Maranhão, but this is an idea, an image of the region. We have 581,000 farms in the North region, according to the census from 2017. 86% have less than 100 hectares of total farm area. Over half of producers are more than 55 years old. 16% never went to school, and only 4% have a university degree. And regarding production, we still have very basic practices in the northern region of the country. Only 7% have practices to correct the soil before planting. 45% does not prepare the soil. 34% do not receive any technical information, no kind of technical information, which leaves producers outside technological innovations, and they are more prone to risk derived from climate change. That's why it's very important to consider all of this in any kind of socioeconomic environmental action that should take place in the agro business sector. And the revenues of this sector, a large part of these establishments have value less than 25,000 reals per year, less than 2 monthly minimum wages. Considering that this is not the direct revenue, is a gross product of the end. 83% of total farms is family farming. We are talking about 30% of all the agribusiness area within the context of family farming, with almost 20 million hectares, and half of this is used for pasture. This is why we have this debate regarding the beef chain within the economic environmental context and its importance in order to deal with different very complex aspects and to generate actions and solutions that will bring the productive change, the production of low carbon emission, and the resilience, weather resilience. Only 17% of family farmers have access to loans in the north, and this generates a vicious circle of poverty and low productivity in the sector. Low revenues, low access to technology, low use of technology, which leads to environmental degradation. What do we need to do, not only in the private sector? Well, we have to change this vicious cycle for a virtuous cycle by bringing in information, science, and technology together with monitoring of deforestation and of the socio-environmental characteristics, but also bringing options to farm producers. There are some actions that I'm going to present that are already been implemented. This is, for instance, 2009 when we had the tag for beef, then the terms of behavior adjustment 2012, the forestry code in 2016, supermarkets with a commitment of zero deforestation, and now in 2020 we went into green economic development worldwide that brings pressure into the financial sector. We have an agenda from the Brazilian Central Bank focused on sustainability, bringing on more requirements for access to rural loans. This is very relevant in this economic, social, and productive situation of the agribusiness in Brazil, and how is territorial intelligence in terms of providing incentives and solutions to change this equation and generate a virtuous circle of development sector. What caught my attention is the relationship between cattle in the Amazon and deforestation. This attracted our attention, but we cannot always prove a causality between these two variables, the herd and deforestation. We know that the Amazon biome is mainly occupied by pastures and cattle raising has grown in recent years. This focuses on the important monitoring actions, including indirect aspects, the ones that don't go through freezers, and there's an important role in the coordination of all the productive chain. With territorial intelligence, we can have information and transparency regarding the relationship between cattle production, deforestation, work of preparing the ground, if producers meet the car or not, where are the areas with higher risk, and where are the actions to promote greater technological transformation of the productive sector for low carbon emissions and climate resilience. I leave this as my final comment regarding the beef chain is in a repositioning as an industry in order to create incentives. Not by itself will it be able to solve the problem of deforestation and other socioeconomic productive aspects. Yet, it has had a role of transformation in the value chain. Thank you very much, Rosanna. Leila, I want to thank you for your explanation when I started to talk in the introduction. I remember that I mentioned slave work and the exploitation of indigenous land as some parts of this social pillar, but Leila, you mentioned something very interesting, which is the producers, that the exclusion of these producers who have not been adapted, who are not aligned with the agenda, is noxious and generates informality, has brought losses to the value chain at large. Thank you for your explanation. And this is the message that we present, the repositioning of the beef productive chain. Now I give the floor to Luana Maya. I introduced her before. She will talk about climate change in the production of food in the Brazilian agribusiness sector. Luana, you have the floor. Thank you, Rosana. It's great to speak after Leila because she already mentioned the whole picture of what's happening in Brazil. So now we have an image of what we're talking about in this great Brazil, because there are many biomes, there are many Brazils. It's interesting to contextualize where we are at regarding international agendas. Yesterday we had the General Assembly at the United Nations, where Secretary Gutierrez mentioned that we are at a time of great climate emergency. He said that he mentioned that we are in the largest series of crises in our lives. So these are crises of different natures, and it's a very complex road to find solution. Has to do with the agenda of food systems that requires a complexity of understanding and different links in the chain. And it's very interesting that this panel takes place today. Another thing that he mentioned was the climate emergency, that we have this expectation of reducing emissions by 5% until 2030 according to Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. But when they made the math and presented the report a few days ago, we have 12%, not 45% reduction, which shows that this climate emergency is of huge dimensions, and we have to act, measure impacts, and have ways to measure these climate risks. This is the context of what happened yesterday. We know that the COP in Glasgow is coming, but tomorrow something will happen with the first time, which is the United Nations Summit on Food Systems that is related with what we're discussing now. Sebedis will participate today. We have an event. We already published a guide for food systems where we mention what has to be done regarding food systems, from traceability of the whole chain all the way to the new consumption patterns and the use of low carbon technologies. We did a summary of what has to be done, considering all the complexity that Leila already mentioned and the importance that we include these producers. This is one of the big challenges we have in Brazil, which is the lack of technical assistance and rural support. We have to train producers in order to include them in our productive chain. And then the question comes, how come the food sector, the agribusiness sector, is going to solve these great challenges, and how will this happen within climate change? I understand that there are two different types of challenges. One is the challenge of natural resources. The sector needs to follow the climate crisis and biodiversity, water, social impacts in all the chain, and face deforestation. And there's another item which is also to face changes in the ways of consumption of the demand from consumers, because there's no point in saying we're sustainable and we cannot prove with data that we are really acting in favor of sustainability. And in the agribusiness sector, we know that this is a huge challenge to mitigate emissions. When we think about the cattle sector, we have over 90% of indirect emissions that come from scope 3. So this is a challenge. There are many people in the sector, such as the case of Mark Fricks, that are moving in order to invest in technology and reduce the impacts of these indirect emissions. One of them that we mentioned with the experts is enteric fermentation. For those who do not know, these are the gases from cattle, and this is a huge challenge that we have to face, but there are many things in the mill. Something that I would also like to mention is that Brazil has all the know-how and the potential to know and be able to preserve. I won't mention it, this is going to mention, but Brazil was born to produce and preserve. We're one of the greatest producers of raw materials and food, but we also have the biggest tropical forest in the world. We know that if we eliminate illegal deforestation, which is responsible for 44% of our emissions, we will be able to meet 80% of our goal that we assumed in the Paris Agreement for 2030. So it is possible. It is possible to do both things, and Sabeti works hard on this agenda that's related with the territorial approach that we mentioned, because we have to see the territory and to see its conditions, whether it's climate conditions, climate change, who lives there, what are the economic activities that take place, what is done in that territory. And when we talk about the Amazon, we're talking about different Amazons. There are many Brazils. We have the urban, the rural, there is a large part with deforestation rates which is different. The complexity of this topic has to be approached in a systemic way. That's what we promote. And as a matter of fact, I can see the entrepreneurial sector in motion, acting a lot faster and understanding this climate emergency. Right now, there are ways of measuring climate risk. One of the biggest recommendations used today is the TCFB, and there is the willingness of the entrepreneurial sector to act in mitigation. They know that climate risk can be mitigated, and if it's mitigated, it will be less costly than waiting for the result to take place. And on top of this, we know that if the entrepreneurial sector does not commit to achieve climate neutrality with the goals of net zero goals, they will have prestige, commercial and economic losses, and also environmental loss. It's something that I want to make very clear. There are there's a right time for the entrepreneurial sector to act with more vigor regarding actions and how they fight climate change. And I understand that this integral approach is essential. We participate, so that you have an idea, internationally we have three large conferences of the private sector in which you can participate, starting with the United Nations Food Systems Summit, which is the summit of food systems that starts tomorrow. And then in October, we have the Biodiversity COP that now the first part will take place with delegates due to the pandemic, and we have COP26 that would mainly deal with the weather and the financial mechanisms related to Article 6. This shows us how the entrepreneurial sector is also preparing its agenda regarding the large world trends, and it also shows that there is no room in the entrepreneurial sector for denial. They did not say there's no climate change. Both the IPCC report show this, and the entrepreneurial sector is being able more and more to measure this climate risk and mitigate them as much as possible. This is what I wanted to share with you. I will be here waiting for your questions, and to conclude, we need a lot of cooperation and agreement between the different players involved. As Leila said, we have to invest in technology and also consider people who require technical assistance in order to apply technology. Brazil has a series of low carbon practices in agricultural and forestry, the sequestering or capturing of carbon in the soil. If there's a country in the world that can achieve climate neutrality, this country is Brazil in this time period, because it doesn't depend on technologies to be invented. We already have the technology, we already have the low carbon practices, and we can, if we want to, reduce and eliminate illegal deforestation. We've done it in the past. Between 1985 and 2016, we reduced deforestation, illegal deforestation, by 60%, when we had an increase of 600% the production of grains in Brazil. I'm very optimistic regarding this agenda. I believe that we have the capacity. We just need the will and the cooperation. Luana, congratulations for your optimistic attitude after what Hugo Gutierrez mentioned in the United Nations General Assembly, talking about the inertia and lack of ambition of projects and finance in order to reduce carbon emissions. And on Friday, when Biden met with Boris Johnson to promote a reduction of 30% in methane emissions, this is also a very relevant discussion today, so that we can be committed and give time to have ambitious mitigation of greenhouse gases. Thank you very much for your explanation, Luana. Thank you very much. And now, the governor of Mato Grosso, Mauro Mendes, was not able to participate in our roundtable, but he sent a video where he talks about the responsibility of the state of Mato Grosso as one of the main food producers.
Good morning, everyone, to all the participants of such an important forum. Once again, for me, it's a huge pleasure to participate in this forum. Such a pity I could not be present in this forum and discuss such important subjects with you. It's one of the most important subjects of our agenda, of our country, and of the planet in global. The concrete actions that each one of us can and must perform in order to avoid this problem. Here in Mato Grosso state, in our government, we understand the role that we play and the importance of this subject for the life of this state, but also for the economy of Mato Grosso state. Mato Grosso state is a region that produces lots of food. We have more than 20% of preserved territory, and we know that. But it is important to mention that because there are lots of negative news, false news, fake news that circulate in the media. So it is important to do the effort in order to talk about our actions. Mato Grosso state is busy turning the Mato Grossan economy into a carbon neutral economy. So there are many actions that are being performed that are in process. We are talking about something that we are going to do. We will begin this work, we will start this work. No, it's not that. There are a lot of concrete actions in our state. We are collecting all the necessary information and analyzing it, and I hope that we will present this work in next COP such as a huge challenge of Mato Grosso and a private initiative. There is no way to separate this government's role from all the other actors, such as private actors. Maghreb is important. It must be performed here in Mato Grosso and in Brazil in general. So congratulations to all the participants. I wish I would were able to be with you, but well, this is my message to you. I hope that you once again can participate in this fruitful debate. Hugs and greetings to everyone. Very well, so this was Mato Grosso government, Mauro Mendes, talking about the need of holistic action and joint action between public and private sectors. Now I would like to introduce Fernando Sapio, Executive Director of PCI. He will talk about governance. Yeah, Fernando, right? One of the most important pillars of this agenda. Hello, Rosanna. Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I would like to talk about a little bit talk a little bit about this gap that exists in the world that Leila presented in the Amazonian region, including Mato Grosso, and in this world that Luana mentioned in terms of climate change and the ACG agenda. We know that everything that is happening in the private sector and in the markets that buy Brazilian product and the financial sector that provides means for this sector, everything is changing. So the economy is heading towards this low carbon economy. So we are trying to follow this agenda of a low carbon economy, and between those two words there is a gap. There is a gap in terms of territory, and in terms of challenges, in terms of informalities, lack of efficiency in terms of production, especially in terms of cattle production. And how can we achieve this world that we all know to face a new reality that is coming to us? well, there is a report that contains more pressure from private and financial sector, and it is all related to those regions. So in terms of who can be this bridge, who can help us to close this gap, the question is that nobody can solve this problem alone, neither private sector nor public sector. We must use the word that Luana used. We need cooperation and conservation. We have to find consensus and to work together. And this is the initiative of Mato Grosso. We have to produce, to preserve, and to include. This initiative, we came up with this initiative during Paris COP, and well, this is the idea we put on the table of the producers, the government, and other actors through these different institutions. So we all can see Mato Grosso territory and think about the challenges we face and how far can we go. And the conclusion is the following: we can produce in order to supply to national and international market, and we must preserve the environmental elements and include the population that for a long time were marginalized in terms of this economic development, such as indigenous peoples, traditional societies, and communities. So this is the plan for Mato Grosso state. Through this group of, well, through this list of objectives related to cattle production and best practices and agricultural areas above pastures, in order to avoid the deforestation, to apply the deforestation code, and to prevent illegal deforestation, and also by supporting family agriculture. This is the subject of PCI in this case, and we need the efforts of everyone. In the moment that when we created this governance, we identified the actions that must happen, and Mato Grosso had quite significant progress in that sense. The governor included the issue of illegal deforestation in his agenda, and he's working on that. So Mato Grosso has been doing better than any other Brazilian state in terms of progress of environmental protection. We also applied environmental register to this agenda, and well, the whole participation was quite correct in terms of private sector. So this is just an example. Matfreak aligned his strategy of sustainability, the whole company, with the strategy of our government. Matfreak is going to be a support in terms of production chain. They will try to include small producers in this technical assistance and in this whole agenda, joining the efforts of the government and of the private sector, and only that way we can go forward, we can advance forward. So everyone has their own task, their own homework, in order for this program to proceed, and we always pay attention to the territories. We are not talking about sustainable soy or sustainable cattle. We are talking about the territory. We want to achieve this balance in all the production chains and all the population that participate in this process. And this is an additional challenge for our investors. That is expensive. It's a huge cost to restore the pasture, to apply technical support to prevent the deforestation. So this is quite difficult, and how can we do it? First of all, we have to realize how much investment do we need. and what are the models in order to achieve this necessary effect. And this is a step forward in this whole management that is here to transform the PCI and to become a vehicle of the investments in Mato Grosso. Since 2015, there were several alliances, as Daniela presented this information. So this is one of the ideas, one of the plans of PCI to attract financial actors. And the World Bank is a great ally in this sense, and it has shown that the state can have this independence, this sustainability. Mato Grosso state currently has its accounts in black numbers. There are new job positions we are fighting for in order to prevent the deforestation. So we are about to launch our agenda of investment towards Mato Grosso and PCI, showing this range of investments and trying to understand and to explain that this is a great opportunity. And our progress in this agenda is about carbon capture, about mitigation of climate problems, and also we are trying to help to regulate those markets of Mato Grosso state. This is the example that we want to show to everyone, and it is happening in practice with all our allies that I've just mentioned, and many other actors that are also participating in the PCA program. Thank you so much, Rosanna. Thank you for this explanation that you just presented as the role of PCI and your governance role. Also, you have shown us the need of investment and the attraction of different allies, because this is such an important topic. I would like to introduce Alexandre. He represents World Bank. Hello, Alexandre. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to the organizers, and thank you for this invitation. I would like to congratulate my colleagues for their presentations. And well, I was asked to explain the assessment and inclusion process in terms of the participation of a World Bank in financing of Mato Grosso state. But I would like to, first of all, I would like to explain why World Bank is so interested in the environmental and climate issues. Well, it is not only World Bank's issue, it is the reality. It's such an internalized reality for all the investors and for all the companies in the world. And we all know that the most vulnerable populations that face those adverse situations, well, they need help, and the World Bank estimates that if we do not do anything up to 2050, the climate change would make more than 2 million people migrate to other places, to other regions, and more than 130 million people would face the extreme poverty. So that's why the climate change is a part of World Bank mission in order to end the extreme poverty. And also the World Bank is working a lot in terms of providing the sources for this struggle, for this process. We have provided at least last year more than $20 million for that, and also there is a mandate of the World Bank that at least 35% of all the financial means provided by World Bank must contain the climate benefits that must be specific and measurable. And another important point, for 2023, the World Bank will have its financial flows aligned with the Paris Agreement. So, in order for this to happen, many investments and many financial flows must be aligned with other sectors. And it is important to include the environmental pillars. In case of Mato Grosso, it's just what happened. The actions began to happen in the moment when those issues became essential. The beginning of the project in 2016 and the whole preparation happened in 2018 during the administration of the governor Mauro Mendes. And at that moment, we were presented the species strategy, and well, those who know me, they know that we were quite impressed by this strategy, and not only because of its structure and goals, but by the clarity of the necessary steps in order to achieve those goals. And at that moment, we understood clearly, not only on the level of the World Bank, but also on the state level, that any investment in Mato Grosso must be based on this solid pillar, and it has to be 100% aligned with PCI. So the challenge was to establish and to analyze the state's situation and to point out 3-4 elements of this program in order to monitor them. And well, it was done basically in an absolute cooperation, as Luana was saying about the importance of the alliances and this partnership between World Bank and the state. Mauri Parasema and participation of civil society directed by PCI Institute and Fernando. And the whole process during the assessment, we had the opportunity to get together with Mauro Mendes, the governor, who was directly involved and who was participating in this process. And that helped us to conclude the assessment. So the resources became available in 2018. Well, the process began in 2016, but in 2018 we got the resources, about $250 million. And the last month we had a mission in order to supervise this process. And as Fernando was saying, the assessment and the evolution of fiscal state of Mato Grosso state is quite impressive, and this is not only this is due not only to our to their governors' work, but also the whole the whole group of partners. So now we feel that the state is stronger and more solid. We have not talked about we have not commented on that with the state personnel, but the process was so efficient and the results were so positive that though they became the model for our financing structure, financing model for other states. So what we did with Mato Grosso, that's all for me. Once again, I would like to greet you and to congratulate Mato Grosso State for this leadership in terms of administration and management, and for their initiatives that are completely aligned with PCI program and that represent this result of support of the institution and the whole strategy. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. Alexandre, we can see that you are delighted with the PCE strategy, and now I would like to introduce Daniela Maritsen, who will present the sustainable program for Becerros. Right, Daniela? Hi, good morning. Yes, sure. First of all, I would like to congratulate Marfrige for your organization, the organization of this panel and this narrative of what happened during last 6 years in Mato Grosso state. So Mark Frick and DH are the main actors since March 2015 in terms of creation of this governance model and this territorial strategy. I believe it is quite important. Marfrik has been an important actor who has promoted all the cattle industry and become important social ambiental partner. It is important for us to understand that everything that happened in Mato Grosso, which was excellent, including this control of illegal deforestation and the participation of public and private sectors. Well, for those who doesn't know, DH is an initiative for sustainable commerce. We are an institution who acts with the private and public resources from European countries and private companies from raw material chain from all over the world. And our main goal is to act on this territorial sense in terms of government and governance of PCA program in Mato Grosso. And we have developed different agreements that represent strategies that have taken place in Mato Grosso state. And I would like to invite you to understand a little bit how those elements work together and what results we have obtained. So we have a little video in order to show you the strategy of the state, the investment that we had to attract for this program. This program was supported by Carrefour supermarket and DH, about €500,000 for small producers that were marginalized in this society and that needed our support. So let's see the video and then we will have a few conclusions. Innovative approach to sustainable rural development. Who's to say that forest conservation cannot bring improved quality of life and income? The PCI strategy has come to answer this question: produce, conserve, include. Mato Grosso's commitment to social and economic development within the state based on sustainable use of its natural resources, with goals agreed upon by all the economic sectors for a common purpose. Be able to get the resources and ensure the preservation of the environment and ensure the preservation of the environment and social inclusion. In Mato Grosso, this is done by means of regional pacts, such as one developed in the Juruena region in the northwest of the country. This makes a difference in the state that is proudly ranked the largest producer, the world's second largest beef producer, and the world's largest exporter of animal protein. Brazil's GDP is driven by agribusiness. And agribusiness is driven by people who have courage. Really shows us a small portion of small and medium-scale livestock producers face barriers to attain funding and technical barriers, which makes this activity increasing the risk of degradation and the pressure for opening new areas. And that's exactly where we come in. The interesting thing about this program is that the entire group of technicians that has been providing the assistance, we lacked the sustainable calf production program. And investment by IDH and the Carrefour in the state of Mato Grosso and PCI aims to change the production and commercialization dynamics of Brazilian livestock. We seek to reach a new level of sustainable production, which is aligned in the way the world we live in. The small-scale farmers must participate in this because it is becoming more and more solid. It is not necessary to log the trees. We just have to use what we have. Those trees that include small scale farmers in Juruena and Araguaia, and the objective is to reach 450 beneficiaries. Together, those two regions account for 40% of the entire calf production in the state of Mato Grosso. The sustainable calf production of calf offers these criteria of the best practices and best practices for production and support for investment resources and technical assistance in order to recover the permanent preservation of the pasture areas and technical assistance in animal husbandry and properties in order to increase stock intensity from 1 to 2 animals per hectare. We are very pleased with the meeting. The environment people visited us and they gave us plenty of advice because we only knew how to harrow and throw the log. As a result, small-scale farmers gain with the improved quality of calves, the ability to meet the standards of new markets, increased productivity and income, environmental recovery, and diversification of their economic activity. I think that this will be good for us in the future as small-scale producers. We are very strengthened by this program. I'd like to join because, well, I have a son and I want him to help me in the field. I want him to become someone in this world, so he has to help us. This a sustainable calf program has everything in order to generate robust changes in the production chain in the long term in the Mato Grosso state. We do it differently, we make a difference. Well, I believe that this video sums up all the narrative starting from the investment in the state and the programs that we have in rural properties. IDH has invested around 9 million euros in Mato Grosso state in order to participate in this strategy. The PCI Institute also has participated in this investment process in small farmers. So we believe that it is quite important for private sector to be involved more and more alongside with the small-scale farmers in order to attract and to create sustainability that would be not only a theory but can also be seen in practice and serve to our population. And I would like to say that the first harvest has already occurred, and with the participation of Carrefour supermarket in Brazil and small stores that are interested in the meat's origins, depending on the situation. Everyone wants to know if this meat was produced in a sustainable way, respecting the indigenous territory in terms of deforestation. And we have a special code and the customers of the supermarket can track the origin of this meat. So this is the message. I want to invite the private sector to enter this kind of practice and this kind of projects. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you so much for your presentation. The IDH is participating in the production chain in Mato Grosso state. And now I would like to invite Paulo, our communication director from Agfric. He will explain us the Agfric plan. Hello, Paulo, how are you? Good morning, Rosanna. Yeah, I'm very well. Good morning, everyone. It is quite interesting to hear this first approach that Leila presented, the context. And when we see the vision of the state and the governor and all the public policies that were developed through the institute and the actions that Fernando mentioned, and then Aluana, who presented the importance of the conservation and interaction between the private and public sectors in order to show the challenges that we face in terms of climate changes. So we were able to see the needs and to establish the programs and strategies like this one that are aimed to obtain the resources, such as program of sustainable calf program that is based on this strategy. I had the privilege to participate in this program from the very beginning, and well, there was another company that also supported this initiative. And when we see all that, we understand that the language that must be used is already established. What we have said, what we had to say. In Marfrig, we have everything in order to be able to line out this program and to present our value chain and our supply chain and to face the challenges. I would like to explain, well, to give you a brief explanation. Can you see my screen? Yes, we can. Well, we were talking about the governance. And in this PCI strategy that we were participating from the very beginning as founders, as the same institute, in 2019, Marfrig reconsidered the whole governance structure because, well, we used to say that if there was no good G, then there wouldn't be a great success in our environmental and social agenda. And this made us rethink our structure and our governance and to establish a sustainability committee. This committee, well, Danielle is part of this committee. It establishes a model of sustainable management based on the principal elements related with the challenges of this cattle chain. So, based on the governance perspective, we would like to mention what Marfrig has achieved during those years. First of all, it was a commitment to follow the deforestation-free strategy, and every day Marfrig occupies more than 30 hectares, which is about the size of Mato Grosso state. And we close this alliance with Embrapa, the the Ministry of Environment, in order to establish the initiative of carbon-free and low-carbon strategies. We know that the cattle, that this industry is essential. In 2020, we intensified our agenda and we've been working quite a lot looking for the means in order to be able to finance all of these parts of this chain. And we established quite robust goals in terms of green gas emissions, the methodology, the production, and so on. The chain that we have developed during those years, I believe that the most important is that when Marfrig in 2020 established a few commitments.
These commitments start from a premise which is essential for us, and that's inclusion. We break away with practices of the private sector in the last 12 years approximately were always based on exclusion. You can or you cannot. And this led to creating in cattle raising and other agricultural sectors, which are no different, a parallel market. So it's a market in which producers, farmers who had the possibility to establish a more advanced production material continued in this market, continued to provide the buying industry, and many were marginalized in a parallel market without any kind of assistance, without being able to apply actions that could lead them to comply with those higher requirements. So Marfrig starts with a program which has inclusion as a premise and includes some essential commitments. The first one is the commitment with the chain of raw materials 100% deforestation free and low in carbon that can be perfectly traced and monitored, and everything we do has the necessary transparency so that all parts interested can follow it. And what I mentioned is very similar to the same strategy of PCI, because this was taken from that strategy. This plane was built by Hans Daniela, who's here, also actively participated, because IDH is our main partner in the design of everything you see here. This is a plan that was developed with Marfrig together with the IDH since 2019 and was put into practice in 2020, and it had very good results. How was it built? We started with the idea that in order to have sustainable production, it's essential for the producer, first of all, is productive and profitable. We do not believe that a producer is going to apply actions if those actions don't lead him to have better profits. This is a precondition for sustainability. For this to happen, he must also have access to funding and financial resources. And in Brazil, we know, as Leila mentioned from the beginning, due to the characteristics of production in the Amazon, we have a huge amount. Most are small producers, and these are small producers that many times do not have access to the market, to the credit market, because the regular credit market increases its requirements every time, and this is an impediment for producers to access because they have an issue with problems in their land or other situations, or problems that prevent them from having access to these credit markets. So it's essential to have mechanisms that allow these producers to have access into the credit market. And we are working with IDH so that this means can be transformed. And with this resource, we can technify production. And with these resources and with technical assistance, we can achieve intensification of production, apply the integration of cattle raising, protect the forest, improve animal nutrition, the grasses. With this, these producers will be more productive and will make the most of the space dedicated to production, and they won't need more areas. So it's essential to have this use of available resources and technical assistance and the technology that will be applied in the field. Once we achieve this goal, then it makes sense to do monitoring and do traceability, because we will have a chain that is responding and complying with all these requirements. And if with all of this there are still some problems, we will have first an understanding of the problem and then give the right approach. And we're not just going to exclude the producer. We can understand what he requires in order to approach the issue and maintain him within the production chain. It's interesting for you just to have an idea that in the concentrated effort that Marfrig did last year and during the first quarter of this year. Out of 3,500 producers that had been blocked in the Amazon biome, 3,500, it's a large number. With simple actions and with the right program, we were able to bring back about 1,100 producers into our chain. This is equivalent to 195,000 heads of cattle that returned, that came back to our production chain. This is equivalent to about 15% of all the production that Marfrig had until now, until last month actually. So it is possible that this type of actions really have a very significant effect. When we talk about these three pillars, there are many actions have been developed in partnerships with many players within the chain, and particularly with IDH, which is represented here. All of this is within the same strategy and the PCI Institute, and they stem from a better knowledge of the whole structure and the agricultural cattle raising context. They have helped us regarding the macro risks towards which we have to address some actions or develop actions quicker, and where there's the need to apply financial resources because the risk level or the risk of attendance or assistance in that location is less. And this type of applications that are distributed within this matrix divided between direct producers, indirect producers, and this is cross-referenced with financial mechanisms, monitoring, and of course bringing the whole sector into these actions and the possibilities that this happens in the field. Actually, as I mentioned and Daniela showed you in the sustainable program for production of cows, it's very good. We believe that Marfrig, and this is also very important, and Marfrig comes in this year, they will do all the bureaucratic side of formalization, but this year they come in as a financing partner of this initiative. We want to duplicate the size of the program. Marfrig will supply $2 million to the initiative to create more soundness in this program. Well, not more soundness because it's already sound, but rather to increase the scale so that in a short time we can have other companies, other players of this chain joining the process and giving larger scale to this model that is already something that's very interesting. Now, with all of this, we can have a view into the future where the world transforms very quickly, consumption patterns also change very quickly, and this takes us to having new food production programs and have a radical change in the way in which we produce cattle in Brazil so that beef continues to have the space that it currently has in the consumption habits, in the way consumption takes place. And this has to be related with a low carbon economy, therefore a low carbon cattle raising. And on the other hand, we have to talk to this young audience. They are the consumers of tomorrow, but they are also the producers of tomorrow. They will guide companies tomorrow. The program Marfrig Green Plus, it not only brings all these actions, but on the other side, it also looks towards the future, to these young people who will make the difference in order to focus on them as of now. This is what I have to say. Thank you very much. Paulo, great explanation. Now let's go to the Q&A session. Here from the audience, we have some questions that I would like to address to Pablo and Daniela. Agriculture is beginning a transformation that recognizes the importance of circular agriculture. We see opportunities to introduce the preservation of biodiversity in transforming practices. How is it that you to consider this opportunity for agroecology and circular agricultural practices so that cattle production is more sustainable and better diversified. And I want to start with Daniela. Daniela, hello. Thank you for this very interesting question. What happens is that we are already using circular agricultural practices in areas of agriculture and Brazilian cattle grazing. We don't call it this. We, for example, in the same sustainable calf production, we have two very interesting elements that are being used of these strengths, the way they call it now, but they've been around for a long time. One of them is providing the reclamation of permanent preservation areas, which are the PPS, and considering the preservation of the agro jungle or the where we have greater diversity of forestry products that can represent these areas of permanent preservation. One of these products is cacao itself, and with this we are optimizing the agenda to be able to increase their revenues for calf producers because of the experience in our studies we see that small rural property that produces calves doesn't close its accounts only with production of calves, and this is part of our problem. They need to include other sources of financial revenue for these small producers. One of them is the Agroforestry Programs, and this has already been happening. Regarding circularity, there's a very strong barrier that as a country and as a sector we have to overcome, and this is how when we join the segments. There are many circular economy practices in Brazil, the creation of bulls by grass creates circularity because the droppings they're also used, and this is not very well known in other parts of the world because in other parts of the world it's an intensive practice. It's done in confined spaces. In Brazil, we have cattle raising that has the trend of maintaining organic matter in the ground. This is an essential point that we have to explain to players from outside that it has the circularity. It has an important aspect that is a commitment of NBC with the Paris Agreement, which is the application of agricultural cattle raising areas integration. This is the only country in the world that has three different types of productions in a single area. We can have soy, then corn, and then all this together with pasture, also cotton. These are concepts which are complex and difficult to understand in other parts of the world. This happens in tropical agriculture. This is why I see that there is a much greater challenge in how to describe our contents and we describe what's already happening, because we already have several best practices in our agroforestry practices and agricultural circularity. Now, Paulo, can you give us your opinion to supplement what Daniela already mentioned when she was very complete about production in the countryside? I would like to talk about the perspective of the animal when it comes to slaughterhouses all the way to consumption as a beef cut. And this circularity is also very present, and this is the fact. From the bull, we use everything starting with the hide and the subproducts that become other products. For example, bone meal, blood meal from the animal. We use everything in this productive process. When we have a certain beef cut, We have many other elements of this animal that are used in order to manufacture food for animals and other products which are used every day, and this is a very high level of usage. When we also treat the post-production of all the waste from this production, we have the capacity to use all of this in the generation of power, for example, through the use of waste treatment mechanisms. We see that this animal that already has a very high level of circularity in the field, but also in industry until it comes to the consumer, it has a high level of circularity. And many times this is not known, and I think that it's important to make it very clear. I usually say that within cattle raising, when this is done correctly within the concepts of sustainability, it also shows the basic elements of a circular economy. Paulo, thank you very much for your evaluation. We have a question for Fernando Sampaio within the territorial and jurisdictional approach. Since the PCI initiative was presented, what is the most considerable contribution in each one of the PCI pillars? Fernando. Hello, Rosana. Well, the PCI pillars are these three pillars: to produce, preserve, and include. And I believe that there have been considerable progress in each one. I think that currently production has evolved in a very positive way. For example, if we see the aspect of soy in Mato Grosso, a large part of the expansion of area for planting soy is already happening over areas that used to be grazing land and they become agricultural. This expansion of agriculture is no longer happening in areas that were previously deforested, and I believe that this is very important progress. The identification of cattle raising and improving the efficiency of cattle raising is also an agenda that has made a lot of progress in projects as the one we mentioned, and they help this to happen mainly with producers who are further away from technology. They have been included more in this agenda of good intensification practices. And in this axis of preservation, the fight against illegal deforestation is the main progress we've had in Mato Grosso. As I said, Mato Grosso adopted a system of quick satellite warnings to detect with an initial mapping the things that start to happen, and this together with the environmental record and the control in the field have led Mato Grosso to be successful in these developments, in this fight against illegal deforestation. And also within the state, the work that was done only by the Ministry of the Environment, now it integrates other departments like the Public Ministry of the State, the Fire Department. Everyone is working against deforestation and forest fires. I believe this is a great progress in environmental regulation, and in the agenda of inclusion we also see evolution. For the first time we see a state program that focuses on family farming, and through this system the state wants to support these production chains related to these populations of family farming. We achieved many progress in these three pillars. There is still much to be done. These are also very large states, and we have made more progress even. Fernando, thank you very much. I could stay all morning with you talking about these topics. It's a very interesting discussion. You showed us the situation of the complexity in the sector, especially here in Brazil. We also saw a general perspective of the large requirements and demands when we talk about this e.g. globally, and we talked about sustainable actions for Marfrig in this sense that the chain should be more sustainable and fair. They mentioned points that served as inspiration not only for the cattle production chain, but also for other productive chains in the country. Congratulations for your work once again. I apologize for my voice. I did everything possible. I took some tea, some medicine, but the weather, this climate is really affecting me. I'm going to go to Mafrig Hacienda to breathe fresh air. What do you think, Pablo? Do you think my voice will improve? Well, we invite you gladly, and more than that, we invite you to visit the producers who are part of this sustainable production program of calves, which is a very good program. It's a wonderful program. I want to congratulate you for these programs. I usually am very critical in analyzing my guests of the people I'm going to choose to disseminate the initiatives, and you are at the top of my list. Congratulations for your work. If you could do ask questions, don't worry, because we have an email which is sustentabilidade at marfrig.com.br. This is the email address where you can send questions if you're one of our guests in the forum. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, and it was a pleasure to moderate you and participate with you. To me, it was an inspiration, and also had great learning. I send a kiss to all of you. I like to see the female representation in Marfrig, Paulo. This is something that I always pay attention to. Gender equality in the agendas. I send you a big kiss, and until we meet again. Bye bye. Thank you.